Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Good evening, choir. You're doing some fantastic singing for us. Thank you very much. And you're doing some fantastic humming as well in the congregation. It's great to be with you here this evening. My name is Luke, and I'm a curate here at Ascension, Balham. And earlier this December, the nursery school next door, Marmalade Owl, had their nativity play here in church up on the stage. And it was a wonderful affair. It was very, very cute. But as I was watching the play unfold, I saw the serried ranks of angels and countless shepherds sort of packed all around the sides in very respectful deference to the Holy Family sat proudly center stage. And it reminded me of the old saying that goes, you're either Mary or Joseph, or you're not. You're either Mary or Joseph, or you're not. Actually, it's not a very old saying. I think I was the one who said it originally. But I think it strikes true because it is a brutal fact of life that there are two kinds of people in this world. Those who were cast as Mary or Joseph in their school or preschool nativity, and those who were not. Just out of interest, was anyone here Mary or Joseph when they were younger? Just raise your hand. Frank, fantastic. Yes, Candida. Fantastic. We've got a grand total of 3. Wonderful. Well done. Congratulations to you and to your families. They must be very proud of you. How about people who were never cast as Mary and Joseph? Just raise your hands. Oh, it's a lot of hands. Okay. I'm sorry about that. I wonder if you're watching at home, whether you're Mary or Joseph or you're not. I was a Joseph, and I was 3 years old, and I was actually given a solo as well to sing. I had the first verse of Away in a Manger to sing all by myself. And what made it even more special is that I kept it a secret. So my mum didn't know that I was going to sing the first verse of Away in a Manger until she was there in the audience watching me proudly. And it was one of my finest moments as a 3-year-old back then, playing Joseph. And I will treasure it, and it will define me always in some ways. I am a Joseph. You're either Mary or Joseph, or you're not. It was never my plan, but when I grew up, I actually married a woman who was never cast as Mary. She was an angel, I think, so I crossed that social divide in the name of love. And for her, as for many non-Marys and non-Josephs, there's still a little bit of bitterness there. We were talking about it just the other day, and the first thing she said was, I didn't want to be Mary anyway. Besides, she said, they always cast the blonde girls as Mary, which is ridiculous, because Mary obviously wasn't blonde. Which is a fair point, so I'll give her that. But a little bit of bitterness there, perhaps. But the thing about Joseph and Mary is that as much as we may covet their roles, they're not actually special. They're not actually main characters on the world stage. They were normal, unremarkable, mundane people who for some reason were highly favored by God. In fact, more than that, they were vulnerable people. They were desperate. They were beleaguered. We've been reading from Luke's Gospel during this service, and we find Mary in a situation where she must have just been a total wreck. She's just traveled for over 4 days from Nazareth down to Bethlehem, by foot or on a donkey. We don't know which. It doesn't really matter. If you're heavily pregnant, neither of those options are great, I imagine. And now, here she is. We find her in the nativity scene, having recently given birth, lying, exhausted and dirty and weak in the animal shelter of a strange house in a strange town, with her newborn screaming in a feeding trough beside her. And as for Joseph, as much as my 3-year-old self excelled at portraying Joseph as a man confident, sophisticated, charming, swaggering, dulcet-voiced, Probably Joseph was none of those things. Joseph was likely a man disturbed to the core with confusion, fear, and a disorienting mix of joy and doubt at the arrival of this baby son who he knows isn't his. So overall, Mary and Joseph, they were average people. There's nothing in the text to suggest that they're impressive or powerful or talented or rich. They're average people caught up in a really exhausting drama. And now we find them reeling in the aftermath of a squalid birth, or as we call it, a nativity, which is a word that I really love, the word nativity, because it's one of those words that conjures deep, festive feelings of warmth and safety and cheer and excitement. It's a special word as well. It's not the kind of word that you'd use in casual conversation. You wouldn't ask someone, what hospital are you booked into for your nativity? Or you wouldn't say fondly to your child, I remember the day of your nativity like it was yesterday. We don't use that word generally. Nativity is an archaic word, and it's a Latinate word. And that's what gives it that feeling of being kind of magical, ethereal, special. Earlier this year, I was a witness to my own son's nativity. And there were no deep, festive, or ethereal feelings of warmth and safety. Because human beings' nativities are, to say the least, intense and untidy. And you know what? They're also extremely fragile. And the thought of one occurring without any gas and air in a drafty animal shelter without a midwife almost makes me want to weep. The word we use, nativity, is a euphemism. It's a linguistic trick that we play on ourselves to make something sound better than it is, to smooth over that desperately hard and fragile reality of birth, of Jesus' birth. Because well-meaning religious people through the ages have wanted to preserve the jolliness and cheer and holiness of Christmas. And the euphemism nativity is a convenient way of doing that. It stops our minds from associating big, strong, powerful, important God and special porcelain-skinned, well-behaved baby Jesus. It stops us associating them with the mess and trauma of actual birth. So there we are, Mary and Joseph. They're unremarkable people caught up in this God-induced whirlwind that's landed them in a very fragile nativity. And having cleared that up, I wonder, do you still want to be Mary or Joseph? As much as your childhood self may have longed for those parts in the play, my bet is that you probably don't. My guess is that you wouldn't want to be in their shoes in real life, and you wouldn't wish that on anyone else either. But here's the bad news. We are in their shoes. You and I are just the same as Mary and Joseph. We're human beings, we're weak, we're mundane, unimpressive, confused, traumatized by our experiences of life, and hugely fragile. And I wonder how this past year has been for you, whether you feel more or less secure at the end of it. If there's one thing that I've been taught by all that's happened this year with coronavirus, it's that human life, my life, is fragile. That's the bad news. As much as we're encouraged to cover this side of things up at Christmas with smiles and family and alcohol and glistening food and shopping, the bad news is we are fragile. We are, every one of us, just as damaged and vulnerable to damage as Mary and Joseph. But there is good news too. As the angel announced it to the shepherds in one of our readings, don't be afraid. I've got good news that will cause great joy for all people. All people. That's you, that's me. And the good news for all people is that we've got a Christmas present. You have got a Christmas present. And it's from God, the maker and lover of the universe, lying in the middle of the nativity scene next to Mary, exhausted and bleeding in a barn, and Joseph, bleary-eyed and forlorn, is a shivering bundle of flesh that is God. This is your Christmas present. God has given himself to you as a present. And actually, more than that, God has given himself to you so totally that the present has been delivered right here, in the middle of the squalor and fragility and straight-up struggle of actual human lives. That's how fierce and final God's love is for all people, for you and for me. That in Jesus, God has given himself to be with us right where it hurts, right where we're most fragile. And we mark this fact every year. At Christmas, we remember that God comes into our squalor, into our weakness, and brings hope and joy out of it. And then at Easter every year, we remember that God goes a step further. God keeps giving himself. He gives himself over to our human death and defeats it, brings life out of it. Jesus dies and rises again. And this isn't just a story or a myth. This is flesh and blood stuff. This is history. People saw it with their eyes and people touched it with their hands. Jesus was born, Jesus died, and Jesus rose from the dead. And this is why, if you've ever flicked through the New Testament, and I'd encourage you to do that, it's very short, you'll see from the very first followers of Jesus that they could step back and kind of review their lives, their normal day-by-day trundling lives, and call them by weird names like salvation or new creation or adoption or new birth, because they saw that their normal damaged, fragile lives had been embraced totally by God in Jesus. And now their lives were different. They existed, to use more New Testament words, in Christ. They're set on a new trajectory, the same trajectory as people saw in Jesus, from fragility through death into resurrection. But in the New Testament, you also see that fragility and pain and death don't go away when you become a Christian. But the difference is you're no longer alone in those things. God has given himself as a present to be with you in the places where life hurts the most. And the other difference is these things are no longer final. They will not have the last word. Resurrection is the last word. God has shared his life with us in Jesus, and that shared life is everlasting, something that we and God will enjoy now, but also forever. And all you have to do to get there is, the amazing bit of good news about Christianity is that you don't actually have to do anything to get there in particular. God has done what needs doing, and all we have to do is to fulfill our end of the bargain by simply trusting that the gift that he gives us is a good one. We simply have to take it and open it and say, oh, yes, please. That's all we have to do. God does the rest. And if you're thinking about opening that present for yourself, you could come along to our Alpha course. I think there are little flyers on the seats. I don't know why it's called Alpha, but basically it's a space to ask whatever questions you want about faith and God and Jesus, and have fun meeting new people at the same time. Or another way that you could begin unwrapping that present is you could simply talk with God. Christians believe that the author of the universe is available to chat, or available simply to spend time with. And we call that prayer. And you can do that while you're doing anything, while you're riding your bike or feeding your baby or basting your turkey. I don't actually know what basting your turkey is, but I'm pretty sure it's a thing. I've never done it myself. Or while you're sitting at your desk at work, or while you're just sitting around doing nothing. And that's what we're going to do now, if you'd like. We're going to do nothing. A piece of music is going to play, and you can just use this time to spend a few moments with God. And if you like, tell God what you feel about this present and whether you'd like to start unwrapping it. So just take this opportunity now to be still and spend some time with God.
From bliss to pain in a blink of time, so God arrives in Palestine. That's how the story goes. A peasant girl